What was the lesson that God was trying to teach these people? Well, it was that when we get into hard situations, we ought to pray first and bring our requests to God.
Welcome to Mission 66 from the Bible teaching ministry of Dr. Luis Sayao and TWR. John Matthews and Esther Sisulu are leading us through the book of Exodus. You can download your study guide at mission66.org and follow along with John and Esther. Let's get started.
A warm welcome, dear friends. Thank you so much for joining us in our Bible study program where we're taking it chapter by chapter and we're looking at the nuggets of God's truth like a miner digs for gold. Well, today we have a very interesting contrast between the happy and the joyful song of victory on one hand and then the sound of complaining and grumbling on the other. Well, as we uncover Exodus chapters 15 and 16, our teacher John Matthews is here with our theme, Praise or Complaint.
Esther, thank you so much. Great to be with you all for this latest episode of Mission 66. A very warm welcome then. And look, I wonder what your situation is as you join us for Mission 66 today. Life, doesn't it, often throws the unexpected at us. One moment we can be thanking God, and before we know it, some sudden difficulty hits unexpectedly, and we come to Him asking, "Why, Lord? Why this?" and crying for His help. We may feel this sense of joy, and then all of a sudden, it's gone. But how do we reach that place, which is a place that every single one of us, through the strength of Jesus Christ and His Spirit, can reach? We can get there, which Paul describes as this in Philippians when he says, "I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through Him who gives me strength." But we know that it is a journey to get to the stage where we can find joy even in the middle of the toughest circumstances that life throws at us. At times, that feels like an impossible journey. And so I think we can identify with the account of the Hebrews in Exodus 15 and 16, where we're at today, because after God had miraculously delivered Moses and his people from Egypt and then miraculously separated the waters of the Red Sea so that the Hebrews crossed over on dry land, and the pursuing army, the Egyptian army, was drowned, coming to kill them. And so there was this elation, you can imagine, of being delivered, but that elation was to be short-lived, as they very quickly began to feel hot, tired, thirsty, and then even sinking into a pit of despair. But before we get to that, chapter 15 is Moses' song of victory and deliverance as the people were celebrating and feasting, praising God for delivering them, for taking them through the Red Sea safely. And you know, music was a big part of Israel's worship, and it seems that Moses himself was a bit of a songwriter and musician. Many cultures had passed down the oral traditions through song. Sometimes we remember songs better than we remember other narratives. So let's read parts of this song so we can just perhaps capture a sense of their joy at the start here of Exodus chapter 15. Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, "I will sing to the Lord, for He has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider He has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host he cast into the sea, and his chosen officers were sunk in the Red Sea. The floods covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, shatters the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrow your adversaries. You send out your fury. It consumes them like stubble. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The floods stood up in a heap. The deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand. The earth swallowed them. You have led in your steadfast love the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them by your strength to your holy abode. And then Moses sings about several examples of how God showed up in might and power, and the surrounding nations heard all about it. In fact, later in the book of Joshua, we'll see how the surrounding people had heard about the miracles that had just occurred at the Red Sea. The word had gotten out, and the Canaanites were terrified at Israel's advance and approach because they understood that God was with them. Verse 17, you will bring them in and plant them on your own mountain, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your abode, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. Then Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after Miriam with tambourines and dancing. And Miriam sang to them, sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. So here, the mood, I think it's fair to say, is upbeat. All seems to be well, but that mood was soon to change, as deliverance was followed by a time of trial and suffering. And that is an experience that our human nature pushes vehemently away from. Our human flesh longs for comfort, not realizing often that growth, transformation, and lasting peace, and most profoundly, an intimacy with God that cannot be found other than sharing in the suffering that he suffered, lies at the heart of the very thing that we often push away from with all of our might. Verse 22, then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness, and they found no water. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. Marah is the Hebrew word for bitter. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? And Moses cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log. And he threw that log into the water, and the water became sweet. It was a miracle, and if we follow the Lord for any length of time, we too will see that God doesn't leave us in the dry valleys with no hope for a second more than we can bear. He always makes a way for us. And there the Lord made for them a statute and a rule, and there he tested them, saying, "If you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do that which is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer." And that is where we get the name of God as Jehovah Rapha, which means the God who heals. And notice that God promised that if the people obeyed the instructions, they would be free from those diseases that had plagued the Egyptians. Now, many of the moral laws that he gave later through Moses were indeed designed to keep them free from sickness. And we'll see that God's laws were not designed at all to ruin our fun. That wasn't the thinking. They were designed as boundaries to try and keep us from harm, often from harming ourselves. You see, God is a God of healing, but he knows that true freedom is found within the boundaries that he sets for our safety, whereas the other side of that boundary lies the promise of total freedom. Do whatever we want. But the brutal reality is that the allure of total freedom, what does it really do? It leads us direct into bondage. It enchains us, and if we stay in bondage long enough, it will destroy us. Under the allure, the title of total freedom. Such is the cunning of the way that the devil tempts us to do this or that. Just once. Did God really say that if you eat of the fruit? Did he really say? Do it just once. The devil knows that is the path that leads to separation from God and a death from which there is no return. And the chapter goes on in verse 27 to say, "Then the Israelites came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water." And here is another example of a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ found in the Old Testament. 12 springs of water, well, there were 12 disciples. And 70 palm trees, well, there were 70 other disciples following Jesus during his earthly ministry. But more than that, the bitter waters of Manna contrasted now with these beautiful, fresh springs of Elim. Manna stood for the unbelieving, bitter attitude of the people who wouldn't trust God regardless of what they had just a few days before witnessed, whilst Elim stands for the all-sufficient providence of God, even in the face of all the complaining. And God sends good along with allowing the bad. He never leaves us in the lurch. And on we go into Exodus 16, which says, "They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from the land of Egypt." Now, there's no pun intended here, but it's interesting how in English it comes out the wilderness of sin, like a pit of despair. This was a wilderness that was a vast, hostile stretch of barren land, which was going to be a proving ground, I think is probably the best way to describe it, for the character of the people here who had just been delivered from Egypt and were happy and dancing in celebration. And verse 2 says the whole congregation of the people of Israel, what were they now doing? Well, they grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger?" Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not." God here talking about the manna that he was going to provide. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, "At evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. For what are we that you grumble against us?" And Moses said, "When the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling that you grumble against him, what are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord." And then we skip down to verse 13 and we see what happens. In the evening, quail came up and covered the camp. And in the morning, dew lay around the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they didn't know what it was. And Moses said to them, "This is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it, each one of you, as much as you can eat. You shall take each an omer according to the number of the persons that each of you has in his tent." And the people of Israel did so, and they gathered, some more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as he could eat. Now by today's dry measure, 1 omer would be about 2 quarts or 1/10 of a bushel. And Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it over till the morning." But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it till the morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it, each as much as he could eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. And that's a reflection, isn't it? That God gives us exactly what we need for each day, one day at a time. His grace is sufficient for today. On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, that is manna, 2 omers each. And when all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept until the morning." So they laid it aside till the morning, as Moses commanded them, and it did not stink, and there were no worms in it. And Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." And on the 7th day some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore on the 6th day he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. let no one go out of his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. Now the house of Israel called its name, this food, manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. And Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations, so that they may see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept." The people of Israel ate the manna 40 years till they arrived at a habitable land. They ate the manna till they came to the border of the land of Canaan. Now an omer is the 10th part of an ephah, and so a sample of this manna was one of 3 things that was then placed into the Ark of the Covenant so that Israel would remember God's provision to them. There was also the stone tablets containing the 10 Commandments written by the finger of God himself so that Israel would remember the law. And there was Aaron's rod that budded so that Israel would remember God's authority through the line of the priesthood. Now, after hearing all of that, I suppose the question comes to us, when trouble arises, as it had now for the Israelites, and certainly it was impacting their spirits, we have a choice. Will we praise or will we complain? Or does our situation make us feel as though we can do neither? Well, thanks be to God that he is the friend who sticks closer than a brother, even when we have little or no strength to come to him.
This is Mission 66, and we're here with our teacher, John Matthews, and I'm your host, Esther. And after reading Exodus chapters 15 and 16, we come to this point of finding the people of Israel thirsty and starving, and they were missing the food that they had back in Egypt. Now, I know that they were faulted for complaining, John, but I have to be honest. Look, if I was amongst these people, I'd probably be one of the loudest ones complaining as well.
Yes, I know what you mean, Esther, and I'm with you on that. I must be honest. I think if we try and put ourselves in their situation, I think they, like probably we would in their situation, imagined that deliverance and freedom would be easier than this. And so they probably thought the tough times were behind them when they were dancing and celebrating, in those hours and those couple of days after the Red Sea crossing. They thought, well, we're through. We've been delivered. And we do that, don't we, all of us, when things go wrong, practically and emotionally, when people are unkind or unfair, when we feel them taking their stuff out on us, or when things go wrong and storms, literal and emotional, hit. We can lash out in frustration, say things that we don't really mean. But what then was God trying to teach these people? Well, he was starting to teach them that life is not easy, and there's something so precious in the midst of suffering that we learn, and it gives us a different perspective and a different peace and a different outlook on life that nothing else can. And he tries to teach us, and this is what he's starting to teach the Israelites, is that when we get into hard situations, we ought to pray first, come to him and let our requests be made known to him. And then it calls for a certain degree of trust that God will supply every need. He wasn't going to let these people die. And he shows that by sending them this manna from heaven.
Okay, so speaking of this manna, what exactly was that?
Well, the Hebrews asked the exact same question. What is it? And actually, that's what manna means. Manna means, what is it? And this was, I believe, God sending them a nutritious substance which evidently tasted like honey on pancakes. And it was its constitution, the chapter said, was like coriander seed. It appeared every morning on the dew upon the ground and was able to be gathered and prepared several different ways. You could bake it or boil it. But as for exactly what manna is, well, if you're looking for a natural explanation, I think you're going to be disappointed because it is one of those things that cannot be explained. Manna was likened to spiritual food, just as Jesus Christ is our daily bread of life, who satisfies our eternal spiritual need as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking that maybe this manna was the food of the angels, perhaps.
Yeah, well, the Bible says that in Psalm 78, verse 24, it says, "And he rained down on them manna to eat, and gave them the grain of heaven." Man ate of the bread of the angels. He sent them food in abundance. That's what Psalm 78 says. And yet the complainers, well, they weren't happy with that even.
John, do you reckon that the angels in heaven eat the kind of food that we eat here on earth?
Well, look, it would seem so, but we're not told enough about that other than what I just mentioned from Psalm 78, verse 24.
Yeah, no. All right. So let's move on now to chapter 15, because Moses says that he threw this log into the bitter water and suddenly it became sweet, or at least it was drinkable. Now, do we know what kind of wood this log was, made of to suddenly turn this water sweet?
No, we don't know, but what it is a reminder of how our believing in Jesus makes our bitter life sweet. And it transports us into a different life with a different glorious future. It gives us a different perspective. And once we have that perspective, Esther, one of the beautiful things about that is that it's unchanging. We have that perspective forever, this life and on into eternity.
It's so encouraging to see the image of Miriam showing up amongst the people and, dancing, being all joyful and playing the tambourine and even dancing with them once they had escaped through the Red Sea. And I know that image might be a little jarring for some of the congregations that we have in this day, but it's what they did. It's what their response was to what God had done for them.
Yeah. I mean, we dance to other things, don't we? So why not dance to the praise of the one who gave us the ability to dance and who gives us more reason to dance than anything else ever can? I guess the problem, I'd suggest may lie in the heart of the person who is shocked or finds that jarring. If the person dancing is doing so out of genuine and full adoration and praise of God's love, grace and greatness, well, what's the problem when it's related to praise? David, you remember, danced before the Lord when he was bringing the Ark of Covenant into Jerusalem and did so with all of his might. And dance, as music, is a form of artistic expression. I think the Lord knows the difference, of course he does, between dancing as an art form and the stuff that inflames the flesh. And maybe that's the reason why people are suspicious of it. Now, naturally, look, there's a time and a place for everything, and dancing would be inappropriate for some occasions, but I think wisdom guides us as to what is and what isn't appropriate.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? We can go ahead and summarize these two chapters, John.
Yeah, well, today, while looking at chapters 15 and 16 of Exodus, we asked, is it praise or complaint? It is easy to praise the Lord, or at least be full of thanks to him when everything is going really well. But it's a different story. It's a lot harder to keep that same mindset when difficulties arise. And that, I think, is the lesson that the people of Israel were beginning to learn. God purposely brings them into a situation where they had to depend on him for every drink of water and every bite of food. You know, Esther, when we are able to trust him when times are tough, in those times when we feel down, but we know in our hearts that his name remains wonderful, that his mercy and his promises remain so true as to be impenetrable and unbreakable. And then when we start to rise above that depth of feeling, that circumstance that pulls us or is trying to pull us into the pit, and instead we stand on the rock that is immovable and sure, then we are moving towards knowing what Paul meant when he said that he had the secret of being content in all circumstances. We're moving then, I think, towards spiritual maturity. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. God is so pleased when we trust him, and we will find him perfectly trustworthy.
Thank you so much for listening to today's edition of Mission 66. Well, we have more of the book of Exodus to explore together next time. But in the meantime, why not join our online community by following us on Facebook? Now, there you can leave a comment on the episodes that you've listened to, as well as learn about topics on upcoming programs. So find us on Facebook and type in Mission 66. Until next time, friend, God bless you.
That wraps up today's episode of Mission 66 with John Matthews and Esther Sisulu. Follow their daily teaching by downloading your free study guide at mission66.org. Go deeper into God's Word and discover how each day's teaching can apply to your life. Download your free study guide at mission66.org and have it for our next program. That's also where you can leave a comment or make a donation to continue Mission 66 here and around the world. That's mission66.org. Mission 66 is a ministry of Transworld Radio in partnership with Dr. Luis Sayao.